All right. So this is how it's going to work. I'm going to try not to fidget because when I fidget, it moves my webcam. I'm going to be, once I go into full screen, thank you, Jeannie. Once I go into full screen mode, I won't be seeing the chat, but what I'll do is post your questions in there. And then when we get to the end, I will go through the questions that people have. And I'm just going to go right through it if that's okay with you guys. And hold on a second. Some chapstick. I can't talk without chapstick. Sorry, I live in a desert. I do. I live in the second driest state in the country, and Nevada is the first driest state. And yeah, so this is the. Do you guys fast so you can see how dry and deserty it looks out there? See if you can see. And it's not showing. It doesn't show. Sorry. Maybe up through this one. I have two windows. Nope, there's a stapler. Here's a stapler, guys. Look at the view from my window. It's a stapler. Anyway. Okay, so yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get into it. It's basically just dry. I mean, we have a view of the valley and there's like hills and they just have juniper pines and pinyon trees. So if you guys know what that is, those are juniper pines and pinyon trees. They're very desert climate states, plants, things anyway. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started then. And let me come over here and I'm going to go into from the beginning. And like I said, I'm not going to be able to hear you guys. Mary, how am I going to know if something goes wrong? What I'm going to do is, because you're going to need to be able to contact me. Otherwise, I'm just going to go right through it. I'm going to send you my phone number really fast and send me a text and I will keep my phone light on. Oops, let me tell you guys on my phone number. Send me a text and I will keep my phone open. Or you can even message me on Facebook and then let me know. Yes, or you can come on screen. That's true. Well, you have my phone number now too. Actually, I think you already had it. But anyway, I'll keep my phone open in that way. And then you can come into the screen as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And okay, owning crabs in a desert state. Okay, and the subtitle is how they'll must be adjusted for local humidity. And because he's cute, I think he's adorable. All right, so just really quickly about me. My name is Andrea Skinner. I'm a USA Today bestselling author of over 75 titles under the name Andrea Pearson. I am an artist musician, and I'm married to an artist and a musician. We homeschool our 3 kids. They are ages 8, 5, and 2. And I'm a hermit crab enthusiast, but I'm new to all of this. So my hermit crab journey, I first got my hermit crabs in June of 2020. So it's been a year now. And I'm book learned weeks researching on the Crab Street Journal and watching Crab Central Station videos over and over and over before I adopted my first hermit crabs. And I've continued researching it a great deal after. I just like to know I'm doing things correctly and making sure I'm not breaking rules. I'm one of those, I don't like being disobedient and breaking rules type people. But I own 7 hermit crabs and I'm finally getting hands-on experience and it's been a lot of fun. My tank is 90 gallons and we are going to talk about that a lot here. My tank. So how I'm going to approach the topic, I'm not a researcher. I have kids and a business and I have a lot on my plate right now. And so what I decided the best way to present things based off of how I've experienced it in the year of owning hermit crabs. And going over, oh, the sliders aren't moving. Dang it. The slides aren't moving. How do I fix that? I'm so glad you messaged. Okay. How do we fix that? Slides aren't moving. Maybe if I keep it like this, can you guys see well enough if I keep it this way? Can you guys read these at all? Comment in the thing if you guys can read those well enough. Did you hit? I did hit play slideshow. It's tiny. It's really tiny, especially if you're on your phone. Let me see. So, okay. So from the beginning, from the current slide, we'll go with from the current slide and tell me if it goes. Did it go to the next slide? Did it go to any of the next slides? So tell me. Nope. Dang it. Okay, so I'm going to keep this up here and then I will have this presentation available for anybody who wants to use it after. And she's on her computer with glasses. Dang it. That's even worse. Okay. Let's see. how about if I do a view or the review? Let's see, we'll come in here and we'll do like outline view, nope, page notes, nope, slider, sorter, reading view, reading view. Does this work for you guys? Can you? Okay. All right. We will do that then. Good. Now you have me on the camera so I can actually see comments. So there we go. Okay. So as I said, I'm not a researcher. I decided the best way to approach the topic was by giving my own experience. I did read Courtney. I only know her by her Facebook name, Courtney Iris Carr. So if she doesn't go by Courtney Iris Carr, I'm sorry. But and I'll give some of the things that she's found as well. But so I'm going to go back over the past year and talk about things I've learned and done, mistakes I've made. Okay, so to discuss setting up my tanks, first my PPDS tank, and then my main tank, and then my second tank. I wanted to do my third tank, but it is still in pieces down in the living room. So this is basically what I've learned living in Utah as a second dry state in the USA. And then I'll talk about pros and cons. And then, as I said, experience with another desert keeper. She's a lot more experienced than I am. I don't know how long she's had hermit crabs, but I know it's longer than me. And then we'll go into questions. So setting up my PPDS tank, it wasn't super difficult because there was only a tiny bit of sand in it. And I had that stabilized before I added my hermit crabs to it that I adopted. And the humidity level was fine. And the whole purpose of the PPDS tank is to keep them from not digging down. And so it didn't matter. It wasn't a big deal. So my humidity did get really high. So I had to crack the lid until that evened out. But like once the sand soaked it up, that little tiny bit of sand soaked it up, then it was totally fine. And there, I built that box just to give you an idea for what things are like in the summer here in Utah. In June, I sat on my back porch and I built the little box that surrounds my my humidity gauge. And I wasn't out there for very long. And it was probably 106 or 108 that day. And the percentage was down at 7%. So that's the way it is outside commonly for me. The room I'm in right now is 32% humidity. So that's with, Okay, so my first tank, I had the tank set up for a full month before I moved my crabs over because it took that long to get to where I felt comfortable. I wasn't fully comfortable, but we're going to go into that and I'll tell you everything that I did. And I had a lot of the admin team from the Lycos group helped me walk through that, and especially Stacy. Stacy was absolutely fantastic. That's Stacy Griffith, for those who don't know. Okay, so I never fully got sandcastle consistency, and I will be showing you pictures and stuff. Got it set up, and I had it set up for about a week, and that was the highest my humidity ever got. And according to what everybody teaches, I mean, people who are in regular states where, the humidity is not a problem outside. Once you set the sand and you mix the eco earth in, it should hit around 70-75%. And some people need to add bubblers to get it up to their ideal, but that was not the case. I was at 47%, which is actually kind of impressive. That was just with the pools without bubblers. So I had some moist tank sealed. I baked the sand in the eco earth because that was what we were taught to do to make sure it was perfectly dry. I'm like, I'm a rule obeyer. I do what I'm supposed to do. I shouldn't have done that. So the advice I got when I showed them that picture was to add bubblers to dampen the wood and add it back in. I think that was you, Jeannie, told me to dampen the wood and then to mist if the above does not help. And I freaked out because misting is bad. Misting is almost always bad, just not necessarily when you live in desert states. And so I followed those instructions and I started getting the dreaded condensation. Oh no, but look how dry. You can't even, oops. Condensation was not an issue for me. It was because it was there, but okay. So then I added bubblers and my humidity got to around 70% and I ended up with a ton of condensation. Way more than that picture was, which I know condensation is normal when you're up, but the sand was still very dry. Look at that. I don't know if you can tell very well, but it is bone dry. The eco earth was not mixing in. And so the advice that I received was to keep wiping down the condensation, to cover the tank with a blanket because that helps keep it from building in the first place, and then to direct vents elsewhere. I didn't have any vents that were blowing on this, but I thought that was something good for people, making sure that you use a vent cover or something that directs it to blow other wares. Okay, so this right here is after I put my hand in the sand. That's what happened. All of that. It was still bone dry. Put my hand as far in as I could. It was dusty to the touch. So I pulled my hand out. It was like, it was dust, right? So what I did was I soaked wood in salt water, and then the humidity was around 77%. And then that's when Stacy said, you need to start misting your tank. And I was like, oh gosh, it scared me so much. I was like, it's like I misted it with probably a quarter cup. And I was like, okay, that's all I can do. I can't do more than that because it freaked me out. But I ended up using a full cup's worth of water. Honestly, somebody who was not a member of the admin team was like, and I think that she was following instructions that were from a different group where people do actually recommend misting. And so, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. And I did. And my humidity got to 83%, my temperature to 82. And I don't know if you probably can't see, but there's white spots on my log there. I started growing mold and my humidity levels were still normal. So they didn't go super high. My sub was still really dry. So, and I removed all the wood because it was soaking up the humidity too much. And I added 3 cups of water, spraying the top layer of the sub in the tank. And then I sealed the tank for another 2 days. Sorry, one thing I forgot to mention, every time I sprayed the tank, I would seal the tank up for 2 days and let it sit per Stacy's recommendations. Oh, sorry, I'm going to clear my throat. Off, apparently. Okay. So I removed pretty much everything from the tank. I removed my Ferris wheel, you know, my hamster wheel. And I just kept my thermostat gauge thing in there, and still really dry. Now that I've been doing this long enough, I recognize the difference because the play sand is almost always the same across the country, and Eco Earth is almost always the same across the country. If your sand looks like this, then it's too dry. And you can actually see the line where those 3 cups got sprayed in. You can see that line right there, that dark line. That is, and you can see how far it did not get. So, and how dry the top of the sand still looked. Okay, let's see if I can play this. So, and turn your speakers down. Just kidding, I'll mute it there. Did that mute it for you guys? Because you don't want to hear. And when I posted this video to the group, Rita was like, well, there goes all your humidity. And I was like, she's right. I was digging in my sand and I lost all my humidity. But look at how dry that is. Like, that is very, very dry. That's not sand castle consistency. And that's after. Let's see if there's anything else in here we want to see. This is just me ruining all of my, but look, a little bit more clay-like here. So, but still not sandcastle consistency. No, we're done with that. Okay, so you can see the soaking helped. It formed a crust on the top, and the sand, even that top layer, was unaffected. The heat and humidity still were appropriate levels. So this is where we run into problems with the research that's already been out there, already been done, and is already available. The heat and humidity can be at perfect levels, and the sand can still be completely bone. Anyway, so I got advice again to soak up and seal up, and then don't turn the sand. Rita was like, don't do that. I'm like, sorry, I won't do it ever again. And I haven't. Okay, so again, you can see the line going down of the sand. Does it show my, oh, it does. It shows my mouse. That's the line going down. Ignore that. That's how often I was changing my water. I just wrote on my tank. So that's going down. And I've got moss in right up here. There's a lot of moss here. There's a ton of moss in a Tupperware. You can't really see the Tupperware. Then I've got a vine, lots of moss, hold that humidity in. Here's another video. Gonna mute it so you don't have to hear my exclamation of, oh, that's what I just did. It's kind of annoying. But so this is after more, I think it was about 2 more cups. I don't know, maybe consistency right there. But at this point, I'd been messing around with the tank for almost a full month, and I was just like, I just need to get my hermit crabs in, because watching them in their temporary tank, they were so sluggish. They had so many of the signs of needing to molt soon. Their legs were dragging, their antennas were, their little ice, whatever those things are called, were drooping. Anyway, so this is when they're like, go ahead, add them. And then I'm like, I don't want to lose my humidity. So I patted I'm like paranoid now after, paranoid that I'm going to lose my humidity. So, okay, so I reached sandcastle consistency, sort of. What I found while looking at this, when I took the tank down, the sandcastle consistency was only in the top like 2 inches, so about as far down as my finger would go. If I had stuck a pen down, it would have only been dry in those top couple of inches. But I was finally ready to move my crabs over because our assumption at that point was that the sand would become more ready as they lived there, because in their little their shells, and then they do mix things up. They mix the sand a little bit more. But anyway, so I added the wood in. I prepped it by soaking in a ton of salt water first, and I think that was another suggestion from Jeannie that would help with keeping the mold. So this is July 19th, July 12th. So that's, a few days later. You can tell again how dry the sub is on the top right there. And as you can see, I am losing the line. I thought that was because it was mixing. Actually happening was it was drying from the top up. So, well, from the bottom up. So the line dissipated, the water did not go down. It went up instead. And it just kind of went up and exited the tank every single time I opened the tank up. So that point, 90%, and I think it was because of the wood, which I loved the wood, and the hermit crabs did too. But I mean, I had a huge log. I mean, the log was like this big, came from my parents' backyard, a poplar. And anyway, so my sandcastle, because I was like, my humidity's too high. I was still learning at this point. I'm like, it doesn't really matter because the bubblers are there to add humidity to the air and not necessarily the dirt around them. Most people will actually put covers, including me, covers on their pools so that when it splashes, flood. So the advice I got was to turn the bubblers back on and to vent the corner of the lid. And so I did that. And I think that was Jeannie too. Jeannie gave me lots of great advice. But you can see again how quickly that moisture is leaving. See, pressing is that. That's my cholla log right there. And I took the big log out that was here. So, okay, so I got to a point where I had good heat and humidity, but the sand and the eco earth were separating. And honestly, they never fully blended. You've got all these lines right here. The suspense is killing me. There's not a happy ending, at least not right here. Okay, so these lines in here, that's the eco earth, the dark, and then this light is the sand. No matter, when you live in a desert state, it doesn't matter how much you mix, they will never blend together. The sand has to be wet first. And so this is just, it doesn't mix. But you see over here where, the moisture reached it, the lines are less pronounced. So okay, so my hermit crabs never dug. I never saw them digging. I mean, they would kind of play with the sand and then they would desert it. Desert it. They were sluggish. They refused to eat. I expected them to molt as soon as I put them in their tank. And when they didn't, I was like, okay, so maybe I misread their molt signs. I didn't misread their molt signs, but I recognized that there was something wrong. I'm like, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is, but I was still having condensation every day. I was wiping it daily. The bubblers were still on, and I still had moss around them to catch splashes and to help with that humidity. And the advice I got from Stacy at this point was to pour half a cup of water in the front corner. So what she did was she asked me where most of the molting. I did not have crabs molting. So she said to pour half a cup of water where it was most moist. And I believe the theory behind that is because it's wetter there, it'll dissipate more into the sand instead of sinking down to the bottom. That's just my any ideas of why that was the suggestion. And then again, to wait another day or two. So I did that. And then at this point, life got really stressful. And that dedication, Stacy's like, dedication. I didn't run out of dedication. I just ran things as much. So I was like, you know what? They're not, I'm taking care of them. They're eating correctly. I'm changing their water. I've got everything they need except that perfect sandcastle consistency. So I just had to trust that the system that we were taught from the Lycos standards were accurate, and that each other, or Anyway, so what I ended up continuing misting the top. I added about 2 cups of water in the front corners, and I was cautiously following Stacy's advice. And I stopped posting in the group because I didn't want somebody who wasn't following me taking my advice or taking what I was doing and applying it to their own tank when they live in, say, I don't know, what's a really humid state, Florida or something, right? So I stopped posting in Facebook because it's really, really hard to know if somebody, what stage they're at and what kind of problems they're having. And so, but like I said, I ended up having to remove all wood from the tank. And my theory, and Jeannie, you can tell me if this is, you think this might be accurate. Native species did not handle the moisture well because they're used to that 10% humidity, 7 to 16% humidity outside. They're not used to high levels of humidity, and so they're prone to more mold. I don't know. You tell me if that's accurate, because you know more about foraging than I do. The cholla never molded, which is weird because cholla is technically a native. So I'm wondering if the native species of wood here molded so quickly or at all because they're not used to the levels of humidity I was having. Yes, the trees. So I had poplars in there. I can't remember what else, mostly poplar. I think I might have had some weeping willow. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had. Anyway, okay, so I discovered a crack at the back of the tank about a month later. Sycamore would be better. I don't have any sycamore local to me. There's probably some here somewhere, but anyway, so the theory was that the crack letting humidity escape. And at that time I was like, oh crap, I've ruined everything. But after everything I've gone through, the crack was so tiny compared to how often I was opening the tank up and allowing all of that humidity to, ooh, yes, please do. I was allowing a whole ton of humidity to escape. And anyway, as I said, my gut said that wasn't the issue, but the theory was that the crack was causing problems. But because I had a crack, and I adopted 3 tiny little, not the hermit crab, the captive hermit babies, but they were about this big, just 3 little ones. And I decided to upgrade to a bigger tank, and I started searching for one. Okay, so I did have a crab go down to molt. So I got the hermit crabs moved to their main tank in September-ish. Maybe the end of August. I'd had them since June in the PPDS tank where they lived for 2.5 months. Neptune went down about a month and a half after moving to the big tank, and it took him we found out she's took her 6 weeks and 1 day. She only dug about 2 inches down. Let me show you where she went right here. This is where she molted. She just dug under this. There's a little window here, and she molted right in here. And at this point, I actually had, I'd removed that top shelf. And I put the water, because I was like, water down, get the moisture into the dirt. And so I put the moisture closer down to the sub. And so whenever I changed the water, I could actually see the top of Neptune's shell through, you know how you nestle the Tupperware inside of another, through the Tupperware shell through the dirt. So the sand caved around him. Not ideal, but he made it. Sorry, the gender was unknown when I wrote this up first. So pretend it says she. I'm sure it would offend her so much to have us call her the wrong thing. But I'm absolutely positive that the live kept her alive and safe from other crabs, because like I said, she molted like about 2 inches under the surface, and I could see her shell, which means she was probably less than 2 inches, but she was fine. She ended up being okay. So other crabs tried to dig and they gave up. So this is a hole. I had a camera on, and so I saw them digging a hole, and then they're like, yeah, this is not what I want. And this was when they first started digging, just kind of earnestly. I was like, okay, they really need to molt. And they were earnestly searching for a place to molt, but none of them did it except Neptune. Okay. Consistency anywhere. I was worried about Neptune down there. I couldn't do much about it, and I didn't want to add water at that point. So I started making some devious plans for the next tank, and devious because I felt so guilty for breaking rules. I was like, I can't break rules. I know I'm a wimp. Okay. Look at that. Actually, I don't need to. Look at this moisture. Can you believe that? This is the dry sand right here, and this is the moisture. And I didn't mix it up once I added the water in. I will explain how I did that. I do have a, I don't know when it is, either, I think it's tomorrow maybe, for hermit crabs. Anyway, so that's a presentation I'm doing later. But yeah, so you can see where the moisture did not reach, but look at that. That is beautiful humidity levels. Oh, you watch my videos on YouTube. I stopped doing videos on YouTube. My life felt move. Okay, so what I did, this is my first plan. As I was putting the dirt in, I was like, we sprayed, you know, the sand. My husband helped me, and we did that for about 2 minutes, and then we were like, this is pointless. It would have taken days to get the sand moist enough. So sand in. I mixed up as best I could, and then I sprayed the top, sealed it up, and let it sit. I level 2 crab care Facebook, a new group where we all are rule stretchers. Anyway, so I let it sit and I sealed it up, and I did probably maybe a liter worth. And you can see, you know, I got some moisture here. This is from when I sprayed initially, and then I ended up adding it in. I couldn't mix. It was so much. This is 14 inches. Really hard to mix it. You guys know how hard it is. And yep, so that's what soaking, that's what a liter did on the top. Okay, so moisture did exactly what it did in the previous tank. It started escaping or disappearing, and I knew that I needed something more dramatic. And so I made my next plan. Plan was to stop spraying the sand, and what I did was I've got this bread knife that's like this long. Don't know if you guys can see my camera. Nope, you can't. It's like this long. And I stabbed it into the sub, and then I took brackish water, which is basically salt water. My video is out. Audio is fine. Can anybody hear? Anybody see the video? Hello? Big knife stabbing. I can see you. I can see fine. Okay, good. Okay, so I stabbed a knife into the sub, and then I poured water along the knife blade, and I was careful not to make it puddle on the top or cause it to flow away from, I can see your presentation, not your face. Okay, that's fine. As long as you can see the presentation. Or cause it to flow away from the blade. So the goal with that was I didn't want to cause, you saw how I had like levels. I had the higher sand here and the lower here. I didn't want it to level out too much. I didn't want to have it settle too much and end up with huge dips. You know, when you add water, I don't know if you guys actually know this, but in the desert, when you have really dry sand, you add water on top, it causes the sand to dip down quite deeply, and it would have dipped down probably a cup or more level worth. Okay. Anyway, so, and the reason I stabbed a knife into the sub was so that it would follow the blade down on through, so that I could, you know, it could spread out from there. And yep. Okay, just under 2 gallons of brackish water. So I used Instant Ocean. And the reason I did this was because I stalked Mary. I stalked her in the baby hermit crab group, and like a year earlier or 6 months earlier, she had mentioned that hermit crab babies love lots of brackish water, and so that's why I used brackish water. I didn't add the water to the sand around the pools because I wanted to avoid floods. I was still being very cautious, and my goal is to get the sand wet enough to seep to the drier areas of the tank. Okay, that right there is almost 2 gallons of water, and this is right after I added it in. So the knife went down here, just knife. I poked the knife in at probably 3 or 4 locations throughout here, several more down here. I put it in here, and then I, excuse me, that I put this in after. And so anywhere the water is seeping through is close to a spot where I stabbed it. Okay, so this, like you guys saw at the beginning, this is after it seeped around. I'm going to give a spoiler. I know I give this a little bit later, but the moisture never reached this level here, ever. It never reached down there. My crabs molted constantly. That should say they molted, not have, because they're not there anymore. They tons of digging, lots of activity. They were playing. Oh, it was so much fun watching them just digging and playing. I'm like, this is what people experience in normal places with hermit crabs. Not what I experienced, but that's Neptune right there. Neptune churned up the sand, by the way. When she went digging through, all of this ended up being sandcastle consistency. Okay, what I have not done, I haven't wiped condensation. I've not even worried about condensation because I was like in my other tank, I was religious about it. And the reason you wipe condensation is to help prevent getting having a flood. So, and I didn't worry about spills around the whirlpools, like around the whirlpool. Yeah, they have whirlpools. When I was putting my Tupperware in, it would spill occasionally, but drips and little splashes. I didn't worry about that because I was like, I've fought humidity so much in my tank. It was just not something I worried about. So I only put moss on one side of the pool, and I did that to help maintain humidity. The reason people put moss around the pools is because it does help maintain humidity, but also to catch the splashes when they come out. I haven't sprayed or added more water to the sub, so I wanted to be done. I wanted not to have to do anything else with it. Yeah. Okay. So the bad news, my tank was completely sealed. My seal on this, I wanted to make sure a million times and a trillion gazillion times percent that this tank was perfectly sealed. So I used a lot of silicone around the edges. I cut the silicone out in tiny little holes perfectly to fit around my air bubble lines, things like that. I just wanted to make sure that it was perfectly sealed. And like I said, the moisture never went to the other areas of the sand. It pulled away instead. So my house humidity is around 25% up to 32% is the highest I've ever seen it. The outside humidity has been around 10%. Ew, there needs to be a space between those. Ugh. Every time I open the tank, moisture escapes. And so when you've got a tank that has 85% humidity and you've got a house that is 30% humidity, opening up that lid is going to suck so much of that moisture out. And it established quickly, like my moss and the cholla log, all of those little things that were in there, that humidity never really dipped. It went to I kept it usually around 82 to 85% humidity. It would dip to about 77 after I opened the lid, but it would yes, a swamp cooler in the, we can't really use swamp coolers out here very much. It gets too hot for them. My sister-in-law has one and it's not wonderful. Anyway, so every time I opened that lid, the humidity would just escape. This right here was what it looked like when I removed my shell shop and all of the decorations, everything. And this is what it looked like. So you can see I've gone back to the separation of the eco earth and the sand. There's a little bit, you can see a little bit of moisture over here, but I mean, this is super dry, very, very, very dry. Okay, so moving from the main tank, this is where things get really sad. I got all but one captive red hermit crab moved over, and I waited 8 weeks for him, and he went down to mold. I ended up having to dig for him, and that was really, really nerve-wracking. He only went down, I found him about an inch down. Sand was completely dry around him, and he was dead when I found him, anyway, it was really upsetting. Okay. Anyway, so that was one of my little captive red hermit crabs, and I was absolutely devastated. I've sent a message to Mary, and I was like so heartbroken, and I tried to figure out, I'm like, why? And then I told her about the sand, and she's like, well, that sometimes happens with, they need very, very wet wet conditions. And my theory is because they're so small, their exoskeleton isn't as strong. Like you get the big crabs, their exoskeleton's really, really thick and really, really hard, but on the babies, they're really fragile and they need separation from their surroundings. And Neptune was fine when she molted, but a little baby was not. And if I had known that my tank was that dry, I just assumed that it was doing okay because the sand near the side of the tank was still moist looking. I did notice that it lightened a little bit, but anyway. Okay, Mary Akers in the Baby Hermit Crabs Facebook group says the sub should be plenty damp. So if you don't struggle with sandcastle consistency, I would say approach with caution. Don't get it too wet. But for those of us who live in drier states, they have to have damp sand to survive. They really, really need it. It's because they're so fine. They're so fragile. They need something very, very, I think damp sand is softer feeling to the touch than dry sand. So, just my theories, I don't know. Okay, this is where my sand is right now in my hermit crab tank. My hermit crab tank is, let's see, these are these right here. So these are back there, but my tank is lining the wall right here. And my goals with this one, I'm going to be adding brackish water to those individual totes, and I'm going to add probably a liter per. I haven't decided yet, but I'm just going to sense things out, see how things go. But my goal is to have sandcastle consistency before putting it in the tank. I will make sure it's fully mixed in, and the totes make it more approachable. It's totes more approachable, guys. But the totes make it easier because it's not a huge amount of sand. It's just little bits. And so I'll be able to mix it all the way through. I'll put the sand in the tank at that point. Again, I'm not going to worry about the sand being too dry, even if I make it wet enough. I mean, over wet, too wet. I know now from experience that even if it is a perfect perfect setup, that the water will evaporate. Okay, so let's see. Savannah says, is it fixed now? If not, could you add greenhouse strip lines and feed them from elevated almost like an ivy line, like strung through the sand? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just going to, for this tank now, and I'm going to be replacing this tank eventually because it's my old tank. I don't know if you guys remember, but some of you might know that it has massive scratches on it. Sorry, I'm stuttering so much. The previous owner carried gravel, like yard gravel in it, and I didn't know how bad it was until I had it all set up and had the lights on top. So I'm going to be replacing this tank in about a year, and I've promised Mary, and I'm promising you guys right now that in a year when I replace it, I'm going to see how this system that I'm going to be doing here, how it works next time. So in about a year, I'll know. So I'm going to be making it sandcastle consistency. I'm going to make it exaggerated sandcastle consistency before putting it in the tank, and then mix it all up once it's all in the tank. Okay, so the pros and cons of living in the desert. Cons: the guidelines do have to be adjusted and adapted. There's not a lot of hermit crab owners out here, not compared to back east. And as a result, there's not a lot of research available, which means we have to do a lot of experimentation, which is fun. But sometimes I just want to know what I need to do. Sometimes I just want somebody to tell me so that I can just do it, right? Okay, so the pros, though, and there are pros. Like, you can leave food on the counters and it doesn't mold or attract bugs. Like, I'm not even gonna, we went to Hawaii in March and my husband left a French fry on a counter, and by the next morning there were ants all over that sucker. That would never ever happen here. I mean, unless you have a major problem with ants, like your house is really old, or really not your house. I'm going to assume you guys have really clean houses, or it's dirty, or there's been, like, basically ants follow trails. And if there's been a lot of food that's led them to it through near open doors or near doors that have cracks, and you basically make it so hard for them not to find food, or so easy for them to find food, then you'll have problems with ants. But ants aren't as much of a problem, and neither are most bugs, honestly. So if you put food in a sink and keep it wet, then it does mold there. But when things in my tank would mold, I'd remove them and the mold would die really quickly. I mean, it would dry out within half an hour. So I'm going to guess that flooding will never be an issue unless you are really unsmart. So don't do anything unsmart, like actively dumping tons of water at the top of your tank. But flooding is not the biggest issue or biggest thing that I'm worried about anymore. And it was the biggest problem based on people's posts in the Facebook group, that I was just absolutely paranoid about floods. Okay, so Courtney's stuff. She said that her tank stabilized better in Arizona than they did in North Carolina. She said in North Carolina, her big pools were too much. So she had the same same pool set up in North Carolina as she did in Arizona. And in Arizona, they were perfect. They were the right amount of water. So she was saying the sand, she says that she's like, people who don't live in a desert don't quite understand how desert dry is. And it's the same for us in the desert. Like, our sand is powder. Like, when I lift up that play sand, it powders and it fluffs, and I record videos of that, and I forgot to put them in here, but it fluffs and it goes all over the place, and it's really, really messy, and you get tons of dust powders in the air. And so that's what we know. And if you're in a Stacey, you're so late. Oh crap. Anyway, so in the East, I don't understand what it's like to just go outside and be able to grab dirt and have it, packed together nicely. It doesn't do that here. So she's had to add water to get it to non-desert dwellers versions of dry, and then again more to get it to sandcastle consistency. Okay, so she said that the people in the desert should be more concerned with low humidity, and the consequences for us are much worse. Like I was saying, my little baby hermit crab. So she hasn't needed to use her heat mat as much, and I've noticed the same is true for me. Like I've got the thermostat on, and it rarely kicks on my heat mat because it stays warmer. And I don't even, I mean, our house is around 70, 71 degrees, but my hermit crab tank is still pretty warm. Okay, so when you're out collecting stuff, choya, she says you need to know where it comes from and know the laws because choya is regularly restricted in a lot of places. So make sure you know what the laws are. Don't take it unless you know it's free or okay to take. And then dried out yucca. I don't even know. I think it's pronounced yucca. That's how we pronounce it in Utah, but not the yucca or yucca or whatever, which is poisonous. But dried out yucca plants. Her crabs really like it. I haven't tried that yet. We've got some of that up the hill from our house. And then when it comes to poop, cottontail and black-tailed jackrabbits, and then pack rat and ground squirrel droppings, and then my own addition, deer poop. We get deer in our yard here a lot because we're up against the mountain out in my little place. And rabbit poop. Yes, rabbit poop. And so deer poop, and hermit crabs love that stuff. And then she was, okay, so when you're out scavenging or being a scavenger or whatever, looking for native things, so watch out for rattlers and scorpions, coyotes, and mountain lions. And I would add tarantulas as well. I mean, tarantulas are usually, I mean, if you see holes that are about this big around, it's probably a tarantula hole. And they stay inside during the day and sometimes even all night long. And so it won't be a problem, but so don't stick your hand down a hole. I don't understand why you would do that anyway, but yeah, we have coyotes in our backyard. So we can't have any outdoor pets unless they're big enough, like a dog, or like good advice for life, don't stick your hand in a hole. Yeah, and mountain lions are a problem out here. We have them regularly in our city. And of course, rattlers and scorpions. People have them in their yards. Jeannie says she has bear, bobcats, fox, snakes, and coyotes. We don't have foxes here. We do have snakes, and we don't have bear. Okay. Okay, so that's it. If you guys have any questions, coyotes in Florida. Yeah, coyotes are all over the place. They are very widely traveled. Okay, so if you guys have any comments or questions, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, I think. So there we go. And it's no longer being shared. Yep, there we go. So the yucca, not the roots, not the yucca. Yep. Yeah, Courtney was saying that every time she says, you know, gather some yucca plants, that people are like, that's poisonous. And she's like, you got to make sure people know there's no double C. It's just one C. So, yeah, I hope that was helpful. Like I said, it's based on what I've learned as just owning hermit crabs for over the last year and being absolutely paranoid to do things wrong. I don't know if Stacy remembers this, Stacy Griffith, but I sent her a message and I was like, forgive me for I have sinned or something like that. I'm like, I've been so scared to tell you and so guilt-ridden. We're going to tell you I added about 2 gallons of water to my sub. She forgave me. But yep. The top of my substrate, says Alexandra, dries out while the deeper layers stay a lot more moist. Is there anything to remedy this easily, or is it just trial and error? I think that's accurate with pretty much everybody. I've seen people comment on that quite a bit. Jeannie, great presentation. Where were you when I was trying to help that lady? Me. Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, I think most tanks, that first inch or two dries out, and that's going to be, I've seen that everywhere, even in places like North Carolina and Florida. It's what happens. I don't understand why, but here, I would say if your top layer is dry, stick a pen down or, you know, a couple fingers, but go down past, like I would say probably like 5 or 6 inches and just see how healthy the sub is below that. Make sure you're not doing it while hermit crabs or where hermit crabs are molting. And then just see how much it holds its consistency there. But Jeannie says her tanks are different for different rooms. Okay, and Stacy doesn't live in a desert. You should move to the desert. I love it. Now we have expanded our care to incorporate your experience. Yeah, I sent her a private message and I was like, I was so scared to tell people what I did because people take things so out of context in the group, and new hermit crab owners. I think we've all been there. We're like really enthusiastic. And so we're like, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that without recognizing that trying everything, especially when it doesn't apply to your location and your situation, is not the best thing. Lived in Coolidge for 12 years. So I'm an author. Coolidge is a character in my books. He's in like 3 series of mine. He's my favorite. Yeah, dry humidity or the dry heat is wonderful. I go outside and I mean, I lived in Toronto for a year and a half where it's like 100% humidity almost year round. And it was really hard. My hair is naturally curly. My hair was like really, really tight curls. But out here, I like to go outside and just soak in the dry heat. And Stacy says she lived in Wyoming, misses it so much. You should come out, because then you would be like within a driving distance from me. And then you could like advocate for hermit crabs to people who don't even know hermit crabs exist. I would have to say I'd never known anyone who owned hermit crabs until last May when I was like, what's a good pet for animals? And one person was like, hermit crabs. And I was like, hermit crabs? You can actually own hermit crabs? Abby asks, how many gallons is my current tank? It is 90 gallons. That's the one that I was showing. I'm just going to keep the tank. West Virginia, right? West Virginia is mostly crab-free zone. Kelsey says, I miss Michigan. It was nice, reasonable weather for like 90% of the year with a bit of cold in the winter. Missouri is soup. Is soup? I'm not, if that's lingo, internet lingo, you have to explain that to me. Too warm and humid for me. Yeah, I agree with that. I like, yeah, I mean, I like the heat in Utah. We get above 100 degrees regularly in the summer. I really like that, but I wouldn't live outdoors very well. We have a nice air-conditioned house, and then I go outside, and I'm like, and then I go back inside. Stacy wants to move home, but I care for my mom. This is where she wants to be. Yeah, I understand that too. She can't do the winters anymore. And winters are really painful for older people. They really are. Tell her she can live in my basement. I'm just kidding. That doesn't solve the problem. Our winters have been really mild lately. Anyway, I'm playing with my socks. That's why I'm fidgeting. So I'm a fidgeter. I don't sit still during things. But go ahead and put in the comments. I want to see, because some of you guys have said, but I kind of want to see where everybody else is from. Okay, while that's going on, let's see. Alexandra says, I find my tank getting excessively humid to 90%. Still the tank without airing it out ever. Everything gets moldy easily with this. And I was wondering if you had any tips. I think it is because of how hot it is out here. So when I had my humidity, when my humidity got that high, it was either because my bubblers weren't covered. You can cover your bubblers, and that actually helps keep that humidity down. It just kind of control a little bit. And or don't use bubblers at all, or remove some moss, some of the like the foraging items, things like that do hold humidity. And then, yeah, usually what I found, and one of the more experienced crab owners can correct me if I'm wrong, but when it gets that high, it's usually because there's something in there that's holding things up too high. And as I've learned, the humidity has nothing to do with the sandcastle consistency. So check your sand too, because humidity now, once I had a tank that was at sandcastle consistency, that humidity never changed. It was perfect. And so check that down deep and see what it looks like down deeper. Your Abby's from Ontario. Either been working on toys or playing with phone. North Carolina, Florida, Ohio. I've been to Ohio, Kansas City, Missouri. I didn't allow my Eco Earth to totally dry. I was able to mix it up quite nicely, even though the top is super dry from opening the lid. The sub underneath still holds shape. Very nice. Thank you for helping me. Eva says, I'm in Vermont, gets dry in the winters. Southern California, West Virginia. Now I'm going to start seeing John Denver. Moved to Raleigh, North Carolina 17 years ago. Crabbers tend to be east of the Mississippi. It's true. That's what I've discovered from being in the group. New Mexico. Clarksburg, about 45 minutes south of Morgantown. Illinois has a lot of crabbers. Yeah, why is that? Illinois, there aren't any native crabbers there. Is it because they're like, because it's plenty humid in Illinois, but I can hear my toddler. He hasn't come visit me yet, so I'm grateful for that. Good. No new text from Mary. I haven't done something wrong recently. Jeannie says, let's see, she's in Springfield near Romney, West Virginia. WV is an abbreviation for a city out here, so every time I see that, I'm like, let's see, Alexander says, good to know. I have also found my humidity to stay stable for quite a while when I first add in the substrate because of how fresh and sandcastle-y it is. Yeah, I would say that's been accurate for me as well. Did my camera actually finally focus on my face? Or is it still focusing on something really close? Yep, West Virginia. What different bugs do you worry about getting on the crab habitat? You know, like, okay, so the bugs that we have problems with are like earwigs, and I've only had my hermit crab tanks for 1 year. Yeah, we do have centipedes, but they're tiny and they're not, I very rarely see centipedes. The bugs I see the most are flies. So, I did have a fly get caught in not like fruit flies, but flies. Yeah, like the house flies. I did get a house fly in my crab tank once, and I was paranoid it was going to lay eggs, but nothing happened. Scorpions scorpions do come inside some people's houses, but they generally stay away from people, and there's not a lot of food for them inside houses, so they're not usually a problem in houses. Same with tarantulas. Yeah, honestly, like Jeannie said, bugs die in the desert. We don't have a whole lot of bug problems. That was one of my pros to living in a desert, seriously, because there are bugs out here, but it's not like in more humid places. Like, for example, we went to Hawaii in March. My husband and we left a little French fry out on the counter, and there were tons of little tiny ants morning and sleeping. Like in Hawaii, I don't know if you guys have been there, but their windows aren't like windows. They have vents over screens, and they would have the vents open all day long, and not in like the nice hotels, but in their houses that people actually live there. I have a friend who's lived there for about 30 years, and we stayed in her vacation rental, and laying in that bed, the sound of the bugs all night. Holy cow, they were so loud. We have crickets here. Crickets are loud, right? But anyway, yeah, Mary says, stay open until you leave. Need to sign off. 2 more full days ahead. See you tomorrow. Thank you, Andrea. You're welcome. Mary, go sleep. And Stacy, how are you feeling, by the way? How's your back doing? Hopefully it's better now. Yeah, bugs, they're not really a big issue, actually. Like, yeah, I'm like thinking really hard of problems. Anyone can get mites. You have to introduce them to have a problem. So I'm free. It's not, but I can at least walk and sit in a chair. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I freeze everything or freeze and bake and soak in salt water. I'm paranoid, and I did everything I could to keep bugs out of my hermit crab tanks, because a bug that comes from a more humid place would thrive in our hermit crab tanks, but I haven't had any problems with bugs getting in. And we'll see. I'll be able to upgrade it. There are fire ants, but they don't come into houses very often. I've never actually in a house. I've heard of it happening, but they are very much outside bugs. They stay outside, and they're usually in areas that aren't developed, so they're not like around grass and trees. They usually stay in the dirt and things like that. Food mites are thriving in my tank. I'm sorry. It's so interesting how the care considerations vary a bit for different areas, even if the conditions don't apply to me. This has been really interesting. I'm glad. Thank you, Kelsey. Yeah, so my parents have had problems with ants in the past, but they also have grandkids that leave doors open and food behind their couches without my mother finding out. And so you leave a door open and you dump food behind a couch, you're going to have ant problems. But I even asked on Facebook saying, hey, how many of you have had problems with ants, and how old is your house, and where do you live? And those people that live in Utah, I have very few people outside of Utah in more humid areas or places that were older houses that were established for ants. And by older, I'm like, probably the 50s, the 40s, which I know the houses are older than that back east than they are here. But most people out here don't live in houses that old, just because the majority of the houses that have been built, especially in my area in this part of the state, have been built in the last 20 years probably. Okay, I think I'm ready to be done now. Are you guys ready to be done? And if you're not, You can say, no, keep talking, Andrea, because I can keep talking. I'm really good at filling silences. I'm also okay with awkward silences, so I can just sit here and listen and stare at you guys. Okay. Nobody's crazy enough to live in the desert until 20 years ago. I don't know. I'm 39 years old and I've lived here my whole life. What safe trees can you forage from? Willows are safe, and there's a lot of willows out here. Weeping willows, regular willows. Cottonwoods are safe. Poplars are safe. Aspens are safe. You have to be careful with aspens, though, because there's a lot of bugs in those, so make sure that you stick those in in the oven. Let's see. We have a lot of dandelions. Dandelions are plentiful everywhere, but those are safe. Trees. Let's see what else. Trees. No pines. We all know that. There's a lot of different kinds of pines, like pinyon pines and juniper trees. Those are not safe. Those are very common out there. Safe. Ask them, do you sandstone it? Or I'm asking you if I put sandstone in my tank. I brought a whole bunch home from one trip and used to have them in my tank, and the crabs love hiding them. I have not. We have a lot of volcanic rock out here, from the Yellowstone volcanoes that went off, and then same with the volcanoes that are down in Saratoga Springs, down in St. George. And I've put some of that. You're okay. Hey, you've got a pass for having typos. I have not put sandstone in my tanks yet. I've not put much rock in my tank just because I'm worried about it collapsing under my hermit crabs. Mainly because I hadn't had hermit crabs for long, and now that I understand that it's not like they dig, they backfill, and so it just shifts things around. Things don't like sink on them. But I would put it on a shelf of some sort. I think I want to have sandstone in my crab tank. Sandstone is not. You're not allowed to take a lot of native stuff from national parks, and so that's something we usually find in national parks. There is sandstone here, but it's not. I don't know what the kind of the we have here. It's we have a lot of granite here. Is it shell? It's like kind of like it breaks really easy. It's not quite. It's kind of like clay that's solidified. I don't know if that's safe for a hermit crab tank. I would assume it. Let's see, Stacy says I built a structure underground, basically like an iceberg of rock so it couldn't sink. Yeah. Shale, that's what it is, yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do in my next tank, I'm actually going to, you guys know the Plasco light? Oh, I don't have it in here. I'm going to have Plasco light run along the whole back of the tank, and so the back half of the tank, and I'm going to put everything on that. Tools are going to go on that. I'll put my shell shops on that, and I will put my food on that, and then rock climbing structures, my hamster wheel, things like that. And then that way they can dig underneath it, but it still offers a little bit of stability. I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be fun. Setting up tanks is a lot of fun. And if you guys want to, like I was saying, my Disneyland hermit crab tank presentation, I believe, is tomorrow. And then I'm doing one also on the PPDS method on Sunday, I believe. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and end this now. And thanks you guys for attending, and thank you for your comments. I'm glad that you guys talk. It is really weird when I'm the only one person talking and maybe somebody else is just listening and awkwardly lurking. Anyway, so yeah, guys, it's 5:30 here. I'm going to go eat some dinner and go hang out with my family and unpack a few more boxes. Talk to y'all later. Bye.